Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dan.
My name is Louie, and this is Dead Man Walking. So basically, Hollywood has been steadily digging its own grave for the past couple years, and, well, we're here to point and laugh. Because you may have noticed that basically movies have been getting dumber and dumber, and yet they're still getting widespread critical acclaim. And audiences, quite frankly, don't understand why. Case in point, The Last Jedi.
What a great place to start.
So this movie has been getting absolutely rave reviews from literally everyone, and yet if you talk to your local Star Wars fanboy, they're still going through epileptic seizures brought on by pure unbridled rage at just the amount of craziness, the hot mess this film has turned out to be.
Can we say literally everyone? Like when we look up critics, has it been positive from everybody?
It currently holds a 93% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, here's one quote. It says, "The Jedi offers a rather bold reinvention and expansion of what the Star Wars universe is capable of. It goes from euphoria to sadness, from fear to uncertainty, from incredulity to the unexpected, moments that will surely be established as some of the best in the film franchise." Across the board, director Rian Johnson is being praised for taking the film in bold new directions, taking risks, being edgy and provocative. So the upshot is this is just a hot mess of a movie. It's one raging dumpster fire, and we're going to break it down for you. So here's the good, the bad, and the ugly of The Last Jedi. And before you ask, yes, there are going to be plenty of spoilers ahead because, our humble opinion, the movie is probably not worth your time.
I mean, you're probably going to want to watch it anyway. If it's Star Wars, we kind of don't blame you, but
It's only fair you know what you're getting into.
Forewarned. Oh, by the way, just to go back to the score, since I like to look at Metascore just because I personally like their metrics a little better, because it doesn't just do a thumbs up, thumbs down of critics. It actually is an average. And they also curate their reviewers a little more. Only 3 critics gave mixed. 0 gave negative scores.
Currently, on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score is a rotten 52%. People are extremely divided over this movie.
It's about the same on Metacritic. It's like a 4.7 out of 10 for the user score.
So, let's find out why. First of all, let's talk about some of the good stuff, because let's not sell it short. There was definitely some good things in the movie.
I talked to people who liked this.
Yeah.
Like, have you?
And the thing they always bring up is the spectacular visuals. Every shot in this movie is just perfect. Like, everything is absolutely picturesque. It's amazing. Rian Johnson is still an excellent cinematographer. There is no questioning that whatsoever.
Looper was good. It looked good. It played out good. It had a nice, satisfying ending. If you got really technical with, like, the time travel details, you might not like it, but if you sit back and enjoy it for what it is and let Bruce Willis tell you to not worry about the technical details, it's a fun time.
Looper being the one Rian Johnson movie you probably have heard of at some point in the past. This is basically the second major feature film that he's directed and helped release.
He hasn't done anything else?
Nothing else worth noting.
Okay. So that's your number one, right?
Yes, hands down. This is probably one of the most gorgeous Star Wars movies because it was not a complete mess of CGI from start to finish. They used a good mix of actual models, puppets, makeup, and they blended it all together.
That's very worth noting, actually, because I get tired of the overuse of CG now. I think a lot of us do when we're talking about like the Lord of the Rings versus the Hobbit. One of the things that stick out is like the orcs were more menacing in the Lord of the Rings because they were actual dudes in makeup.
Or even just like Thor Ragnarok. It was the entire thing was just one big soundstage shot, and it was really obvious from the get-go. Not that you minded it so much, but it just felt like you were watching an animated movie.
Correct. So the point, like, they bring back puppeteering. They don't just CG every monster. That is cool to just see things that are actually real. That's a huge praise that Mad Max Fury Road got, was actually how many things in that movie were real.
Because as realistic as CGI gets, it can't always cross the uncanny valley. It won't give that same weight that a physical object does. And actors interact with physical objects better. They just do.
Yeah. I mean, if you want proof of this, I mean, just look at behind the scenes of, like, actors interacting with just any CG character, Dobby, Gollum. I mean, their actors are forced to look at like float like balls on string and treat them like people.
It's hard. So either way, the last Jedi walked that line, and they walked it well. What other good stuff was there for?
All right. Well, speaking of creatures, I'm a little more specific here. I said the Porgs and Chewbacca.
Honestly, the Porgs really surprised me. Like, I was ready to hate those little buggers right out of the gate because it looked like another cheap toy grab. It's like, oh, here we go. It's Ewoks, it's Gungans, it's just another stupid animal all over again.
If any toys sell for this movie, it has to be the Porgs because they were funny. Like, they had some good moments. There really wasn't anything to complain about them. They weren't like overdone. And they showed up alongside Chewbacca a lot for a lot of the
comedic
humor.
Effect.
Exactly. Like it was actually a genuinely nice departure from the slog that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think the reason I didn't hate them as much is precisely because they had absolutely no impact on the story whatsoever. They weren't turning the tide of battle. They weren't carrying someone to safety. They were just like random little set pieces that were just kind of funny.
They were kind of there to be like Scrat or something.
Yeah, not really doing anything, just there. So as far as dumb little animals go, I'm okay with the Porgs.
Yeah. Were they all? No, they were modeling. Like, they did some puppeteering with that. With the Porgs, I
They
think.
did, but apparently they also transposed the Porg animation over the local puffin population on the island they were filming on, just because these birds were everywhere. So they literally just animated over the birds in the nests, so they wouldn't have to wipe it out.
Which was also part of the inspiration for the Porg, was like, okay, there's these puffins everywhere. We have to come up with a Star Wars version of this.
The only other good thing I can think of from this movie, besides the music score, which Star Wars music is always good, is that a few of the actors did a very good job. Oscar Isaac as Poe Dameron, Adam Driver as Kylo Ren. Both of their characters were limited by the script, but the actors themselves, they made the most of what they had to work with. Andy Serkis was great as Snoke, but he's always great at everything he does.
Did you just like rattle off your 2 and 3 there?
The music score doesn't really count.
The music score doesn't count. Okay.
I literally can't think of anything else good about this movie.
The music score, I mean, yeah, you're right. It doesn't really count. It's just, it's been done before. It's the same John Williams score. I mean, did they even bring him on to do any different music for this? Because I feel like we had different sound pieces for The Force Awakens. There were scenes that were a little more subtle that
Some of the tracks were clearly remixes of old Star Wars music. Some was like it just rehashed.
When we got to the end of the movie, I felt like we were hearing nothing but stuff we've heard before.
And I'm okay with that.
Which is fine because, yeah, you expect the same thing like when you boot up a Star Wars game. It's like, yes, here's the familiar tune as I'm hacking through droids or whatever, you know. Speaking of hacking through droids, my number 2, I just said entertaining action scenes that feel both fresh and distinctly Star Wars. So somewhat
That's
familiar.
true. The opening fighter sequence was pretty cool.
The bombing run.
The bombing run was amazing.
Like, Star Wars has been kind of known for pulling inspiration from like World War II. So for instance, like the trench run, George Lucas got inspiration from, what was that movie with like the bouncing Dam Busters?
Oh, okay.
Of like flying through the trench. And for this one, there was inspiration from like early bombers, where there are these large clunky machines that the smaller fighters had to protect.
And the interesting
thing
thing
was cool because like they'd open up that door and like there was all that, I guess there were like thermal detonators, like lines of them or something.
Literally just racks and racks and racks that fall out of the starship.
I guess from that perspective, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It would
Apparently,
be like if
there's
just
gravity
tied...
in space.
Well, I'm thinking like now I say thermal detonators because those are like the hand grenades of Star Wars.
That's what they look like, though.
So like I guess these bombers, it would be like if you just had like chains of like hand grenades all tied to each other, and when they drop, all the pins get pulled.
I mean, you go back to World War I, that's what they were doing. But either way, the opening fighter...
World War I, they also threw bricks out of planes.
They just, hey, hold up the kitchen sink out there. Ha! Take that! But either way, the opening fighter sequence was so well done that you kind of missed all the stupid stuff that happened.
I also liked the throne room fight scene. not the whole of it, but once the bizarre weapons started coming in that just we hadn't seen before, that like chain sword thing.
In other words, the movie was good when it was actually being a Star Wars movie.
Right. And then Millennium Falcon had, I think, one of the better flight sequences toward the end. He started flying in places that looked cool around the planet.
Proving once and for all that Chewbacca is just as good of a pilot as Han Solo.
Hasn't he always been? I mean,
I don't know, but Han Solo's not around to contest the fact anymore.
this is true. All right, so for my last point, I just put Benicio del Toro.
I don't know what he was doing in this movie.
I don't know either, but it was so refreshing to see him.
And in case you're wondering, spoilers, he absolutely betrays everyone. I mean, like he does in every single film he's in.
The thing is, like, because you mentioned Adam Driver as being, like, a potentially better actor just in a crappy role. I feel like Benicio del Toro, out of everyone else, did the best with what he had.
Well, that's because he was just playing himself.
This is true. He was playing a very stuttery version of himself.
They just find some random hobo and, hey, can you come work for us? Oh, curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal. All right.
I don't have any comments for Benicio del Toro. It just that's it.
So that's the upside of the movie. There were a handful of good actors. There were some great fight scenes, and the entire picture itself was just beautiful to watch. But now we're going to get... This next part's just going to be a straight-up rage fest, because that's all that's really left.
Not so beautiful. Like, it looks pretty, but at the same time, now you're cringing watching it. And now you're wondering, why is something so horrible so beautiful?
It's kind of like that really hot girl you wanted to take to prom, and then once you did, you found out that she has a really annoying horse laugh and bad breath, and the whole picture's just ruined. So what was the first thing that really just cheesed you off about The Last Jedi?
That cheesed me off... All right, this is kind of broad. Sloppy, explicit, out of place, and on the nose social and political commentary. Look, slavery and animal abuse. Not much more than that. Just it's there, and we're going to complain about it. And
you know, that dovetails into one of my biggest complaints, because a lot of people, they're griping about like the space physics not making sense, the force use not making sense. You can make an entire half-hour podcast just on all the random little technical stuff that's totally contradictory. But the biggest problem I had was literally an entire third of the movie is devoted to this random excursion away from the rest of the plot to this planet that's basically just Casino Royale had a dirty love child with the Fifth Element. And the entire subplot is just so Finn and Rose, who is the most useless character since Jar Jar Binks,
she has her own slot on my like.
She's that bad, but it's just so they can point at things and go, "See, bad. That's bad."
And that's what I mean. It's just it's explicit, and it doesn't do anything with it. Like it's just there, and we're like, okay, we came to watch a Star Wars movie, not listen to your. You complain about stuff like, yes, animal abuse is bad, but why are we talking about it?
To recap a little bit for anyone who doesn't feel like watching the movie, the basic plot is the rebels, the resistance, totally not the rebels, have been cornered by the First Order, who have somehow managed to conquer the galaxy in a grand total of 3 days. And they're running away from the planet like the rebels always do, and the First Order finds out that they can actually chase them because they have light speed tracking. And somehow, now that spaceships have fuel... that wasn't really a thing before in Star Wars universe, but
we
whatever.
never talked about it. I guess we could assume that like they need something to run on.
I just kind of accept it. It's like, you know what, technology, whatever. They're flying around in space.
I mean, they travel planets and like across the galaxy with light speed, which if you think about light speed, like that it actually takes like months to get across the galaxy.
Either way, they find out they have 10 hours of fuel left, and so they're just slightly faster than the First Order ships, and so we get the beginning of the longest, most boring car chase in space ever, with the First Order ships taking the occasional pot shot just to let the rebels know they're still there.
And that's what they felt like, pot shots. It just like, never felt that menacing.
You! F you and everything you stand for!
Oh, they have shields up. Well, keep bombarding them. They can't keep them up forever.
Seriously, F those guys. And so it's just this like slog of a chase, and things kind of happen around it. And this entire subplot... Because my biggest complaint with the movie is the story. And a bunch of people, critics and fans of this movie like have told me, hey, it doesn't matter if you're looking for plot holes, you're just gonna ruin.
I don't look for those plot holes; they find me, dude. I had to replace my struts once.
Well, that's the problem with these, is the plot holes in this movie bring you to a crashing halt as well. It's like one thing to overlook something, like the beginning, that fighter scene in the beginning. You didn't even notice that these bombs were just falling out of the ships via gravity in space because the fight scene was so cool.
You don't think about it. Yeah, it's...
When you're just literally sitting in a spaceship...
You don't think about why there's sound in space
traveling in one direction, waiting to die. Suddenly you notice all the stupid little things this movie is doing. So...
Okay, another one for the explicit, like, political commentary. I'm here to hack stuff, and by the way, I deal weapons to everybody. Just we gotta throw that in there. The weapons dealing, the war, like how it's bad for everybody. This is the part of Benicio del Toro's character that they forced him to say that you can just forget about and just focus on how much fun he is to watch. The new female characters in The Last Jedi. I said this is an example of how third wave feminists don't want equality. Apparently they want revenge, according to this movie, because it's just...
See, that's the problem, is they're clearly trying to push strong female characters, but they're doing it in just the dumbest way possible. So first of all, you have this new character, Rose Tico, who they clearly want to be a big part of the story. And she's just absolutely awful. It's like an anime waifu come to life following Finn around with big star eyes. And they go on this little jaunt to Casino Royale to save the animals. And they proceed to ride these space horses through the town, causing all sorts of havoc. And she's only satisfied when they set them free at the end. Now she can rest in peace. Right. In the meantime, you can see like space choppers closing in on these horses, ready to herd them up with no problem whatsoever as they leave the planet again. So all these people have done with all their property damage has caused more trouble for the slaves and the animals they're wanting us to feel bad for.
So the point about the feminism that I'm making is like, Star Wars has always had strong female characters. It had in the original trilogy.
From the very beginning.
It had it in the prequels even. I mean, Queen Amidala. Padme. Like they were ordering troops around. Princess Leia shoots stormtroopers in like the first movie ever.
Orders Han around.
Exactly. And
the idea that there are no strong female characters in the Star Wars universe is just hilarious. Instead, they had to create Admiral Tumbler out of thin air.
Well, it was nice to see Carrie Fisher come back and like actually act like a general for a little bit, actually. This is one of the little good things that I didn't list, but she literally smacks Poe in the face at one point and demotes him, and I was like, oh shoot, she's acting like a general now. This is like a military thing she's
Honestly,
doing.
Things were going great right up until she got blasted out into space and died.
Or did she? So here's the
thing. So at one point in the movie, Kylo Ren is lining up the sights on the bridge of... I don't even remember what the name of their starship is called. It looks like the Home 2. I don't think it is. And his wingmen take out the bridge. Leia is blown out into space, and you can see her freezing over in space. And all of a sudden...
we're like, oh, shoot.
Like, that's how they did it.
We're kind of skipping around, because this is actually where I got into my ugly... I put Carrie Fisher's sloppy send-off.
All right, you know what? We're going to address the Superman flight in a little bit. Long story short, Princess Leia is down for the count, and so Admiral Tumbler has to take over.
Back to what we're talking about. Another female character steps, another new one.
It's that lady from Jurassic Park, but with purple hair for some reason.
That's the only other movie that I can think of that she's in.
And I cannot remember her name.
She shows up, and we're like, okay, so this is supposed to be, the next in command for Princess Leia, even though we've never seen her before until now, because I guess that many of her, second in commands died in that initial blast, and. She sets herself up really as a character that you dislike. And the movie knows this, too. And they want
You seriously hate her right off the bat.
And the thing is, the way it's set up is you're supposed to first think that maybe she isn't working in everyone's best interest, that she's an incapable leader, that she doesn't know what she's doing, and then they're supposed to turn it around and be like, oh, she actually had this plan all along.
Wait, okay, here's the thing.
The way they go about it is so bad.
This is why everyone hates her, because Leia is in a coma, Admiral Tumbler takes over, and they ask her what her plan is. And she tells everyone that her plan is just going to chug along in a straight line until they run out of gas.
They have no plan on, like, where to go, like, nothing.
Like, I can't emphasize this enough. She doesn't share it with anyone. It's not just Poe that she's ignoring. It's literally anyone.
She eventually has a plan,
but she doesn't tell anyone.
She doesn't say that to anyone. Yeah, exactly. And so
then when they ask her about it, she's like, well, it's a need to know. You don't need to know.
Normally, that would work. However, when literally nobody trusts you, it doesn't work that way.
And so Poe winds up leading a mutiny that's only wildly successful because no one on the ship, men and women alike, enjoy this lady being in charge because her plan, as she's explained it, sounds really depressing, dying in the cold vacuum of space. And that's where we get the entire subplot of Finn and Rose. Like, first they Skype call that, like, little vegetable person with goggles from The Force Awakens and ask them how they can get onto Snoke's command ship. And she's, like, shooting people for some reason.
She has got the best, what are those called? GoPros following her around during that shootout. Like, she has the bar fight edition of selfie stick.
Her selfie stick game is strong. And she basically tells them they had to go find this expert code breaker on, like, the planet of heavy political metaphors.
When they say, like, code breaker, that... Thinking about it now again, like it doesn't sound very Star Warsy for some reason when they say Codebreaker. Like, I feel like if they could have worded it to something, maybe it sounded a little more World War II-y. Like, I don't know. Use different
Either way,
verbiage.
after Rose is done going squee over Finn, they take off to find this expert codebreaker. And they find Benicio del Toro being, like, shady and skeevy as usual. And in the meantime, Leia wakes back up. They put Poe in the brig because it turns out Admiral Tumbler had a plan all along. There's a conveniently located planet that's within, like, easy driving distance of where they fell out of light speed. And they're just going to drop all these small transports to fly to this planet while the big ships keep going in a straight line. That way the First Order never knows they got away.
Right. We got through pretty much my one. What do you have?
I mean, that plot arc itself is my biggest complaint with it because the subplot has no point. It has no reason to exist. It doesn't advance the plot. It doesn't advance characters. It doesn't make a good point.
So that somebody can feel bad
for space horses.
So that it exists so that the female character that we mentioned that is presented as a horrible leader and pretty much is one can suddenly be elevated by the fact that these people went on this side quest, disobeyed her, and now put everybody in danger.
So this Tumblerina plan fails literally because she wouldn't tell anyone what it was. And so they go found a guy who wound up betraying them to the First Order, and they start blowing the transport ships out of the sky. They just... what? The whole... like. There's so many other minor plot holes people can complain about. That's the biggest one. It's like, that's just lazy story writing. It's just story existing for its own sake. It has no purpose. It doesn't build on anything. It doesn't build anything new. And they're just bent
it doesn't contribute to
breaking
an experience,
the flow.
to the enjoyment of what these movies are supposed to be. I mean, they're supposed to be summer movies. We didn't come here for anything philosophical. We didn't come here for anything preachy. We came here for a Star Wars movie, and yeah, you don't have to put that in a tiny box. We get it. You can break new ground, you can try new things, but not to the extent where you just disrupt the core fan base.
Well, that's is because people were saying it's like, oh well, don't you want something new? You didn't like it when they just repeated the old thing. It's like, well, no, we're not looking for repetition. We're looking for progression. There is no progression. This guy's just like Rian Johnson just jets out into left field and never comes back. And that was actually the other thing. The big bad for me was he wasn't content with just burning down everything Star Wars related. He also burns all the bridges between The Last Jedi and its immediate prequel, The Force Awakens. All of the random subplots that J.J. Abrams set up, Rian Johnson either just straight up forgets about or just shoots in the face. Literally cuts in half.
We have no idea where this is going.
None, because he just nukes the entire set, all the groundwork that Abrams put together.
I mean, keep in mind, they blew up a planet in The Force Awakens. There's no, like, new planet that comes back for them to blow up. There's no new clear villain anymore, other than I guess Kylo Ren. But he's kind of supposed to be this like, I'll say like Prince Zuko character from like The Last Airbender. Like that's kind of what he's supposed to be.
He's given off heavy like redeemable villain vibes, but it's just like everything from The Force Awakens. You never get any more information on the First Order. They never explain how the First Order rises to power, where the New Republic went, why the Resistance comprises of like 5 ships at the beginning.
And The Last Jedi repeatedly pounds on our head that none of that matters. We're just going to burn it all away and go out into the vacuum of space and
they say it explicitly, like from the trailer onwards, their big marketing point is Kylo Ren saying, you know, let the past die, let the old die, kill it if you have to. And Rian Johnson, apparently forgetting that Kylo Ren is a Sith when he's saying this, decides that's a good idea to apply to everything, and just proceeds to burn all the bridges he can. Luke's map, gone. Supreme Leader Snoke's backstory, motivation, significance, and plans, gone. C-3PO's mysterious red arm, gone.
So if a Sith was the one that said this, is Rian Johnson really saying that his own movie and his own plot arc?
Look, I'm not saying that Rian Johnson.
Evil.
I'm not saying that Rian Johnson's gone to the dark side, but in interviews, he has openly teased the idea of bringing Gungans back for his new trilogy. He may not be a Sith, but he's out of control.
Is Rian Johnson the masochistic director of Star Wars?
But everything, Rey's mysterious parentage, in this film, they literally tell you it doesn't matter. They were nobody. There is no point to even knowing anything about Rey. She's not special. And so all the arguments people were making as to why she wasn't a Mary Sue character in the first one, blown out of the water in this one. She's just automatically good at everything. She never actually gets training from Luke Skywalker. He like tickles her with a leaf, smacks her around a bit, and somehow she's like an instant Jedi master.
It's not that she's a Jedi master. It's, I don't know, that she manages to just stumble her way into like being good at everything, I guess. It's weird. It's not that she's doing it tactfully, like that's at least presented well, but at the same time, the fact that she continuously does no wrong.
The last movie, she didn't know how to use a lightsaber. This movie, she not only beats Luke Skywalker, she takes on an entire room of people and wins. And to clarify, this isn't like any other Star Wars movie where there's a significant period of time between films. This literally happens right after the previous film, like within days, because she arrives on the planet, and the first scene picks up with her meeting Luke again. She gives Luke his lightsaber, and Luke just sets the tone for the whole film by chucking that sucker over his shoulder like it was a soda can.
All right, I know you can talk forever about the bad, but does that cover your points?
I'm going to force myself to be done.
All right, you're going to... That force isn't going to become awakened, and then...
Oh, the force is awakened. It has gone to the dark side. I'm ready to force choke some people right now.
All right. So I have my number 2 point. Number 3 we already covered. It's just Rose. I just wrote one word. I wrote Rose.
She is the new Jar Jar Binks.
I seriously believe if she was cut from this movie, or if she ceased to be a significant character after her like initial scene with Finn was like trying to leave on the escape pod and she like tasers him. Like if she just stopped being in the movie after that would have been fine. This movie would have been a lot better.
She screws up the one point of major character development that anyone could have had in this film. None of the characters were developed at all. Like, you could have replaced Finn and Rey with a well-dressed coat rack. Nobody would have noticed. At the very end of the film, Finn has an opportunity to sacrifice himself and save the entire Rebel force because they're hiding behind a giant door. Like, of an impenetrable door. And apparently the Empire just has, like, Grom sitting up on their starship, and they drop it down to planet. It's like a big old cannon they're just going to blow the door open with. And he's going to fly into that cannon and blow it up. And he's getting ready to do this, and you're thinking, wow, they're actually going to kill someone off. This movie that keeps claiming about how it's going to be so edgy might actually do something edgy. He's going to finally learn to stop running and sacrifice himself for the greater good. And all of a sudden, here comes new Jar Jar Binks flying out of the side.
Misa Rose! Misa save you, Finn!
Knocks him out of the way. Somehow they both don't die. And when he like drags her out of the cockpit, she just says some asinine thing like, what is it she said? It was...
She said, I believe it was, we don't win wars by killing the things we hate. We do it by saving the things that we love.
And literally, as she says this, the cannon blows a hole in the mountain that all the rebels are hiding in.
I couldn't help myself. I spoke out in the theater. Like, we don't love them.
Would have been nice if someone tried to save them.
And it's not like... The thing is, it's been described online like, oh, people who are trying to defend Rose, people who are saying that she's like a great character.
She's not a good actor either.
They're saying that, oh, this was a moment of dumb self-sacrifice for Finn. That's what she saved him from, by smashing into him in a head-on collision.
She saved him from a head-on collision because she was thirsty.
She saved him with the head-on collision. But they could have explained, if it actually was a dumb moment of self-sacrifice where like it wouldn't have worked, that should have been explained.
But everything indicates that it would have.
Yes.
And the thing is, there's apparently, like I was talking to, neither one of us consider ourselves hardcore Star Wars fans. We enjoy the movies. We know enough about the movies and know what stuff doesn't work. And I was talking to a real Star Wars fan, and apparently the books they've released surrounding The Last Jedi explain some of the different elements in the movie. But the problem here is they're not hinted in with the movie at all. And if the movie just leaves you asking so many questions, you need a freaking illustrated encyclopedia to get the questions answered. There's a problem.
Star Wars is known for having like a lot of things in it where you're like that aren't wholly explained, but it's not to the point where the plot hinges on it that you just leave yourself scratching your head. Like, you still get the overall premise, you still accept the things that are happening typically.
You
in
can
the other
accept
movies.
it at face value because the story is moving along so quickly that you're already moving on to the next point.
Or that if you watch the old movies, especially for movies from that time period, I mean,
they roll along pretty quick.
They happen. They're snappy. Okay, so we covered. I have one more thing for bad. One more point.
Hit me.
All
Hit
right.
me.
So the bad guys sucked.
Oh my word! It's like the First Order is being run by children.
That's literally the first thing I wrote. Is the First Order acts like children.
It's like they have all the strategic know-how of an overripe apricot. They're just screaming at each other the entire time.
They're screaming at each other.
Slapping
No
each
character
other.
is really compelling. I wrote this. They conquered the galaxy between the last film and this one because they're apparently space North Korea, only without the cartoonishly horrible dictatorship and hilarious assumed personality of Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un. Like, there's just nobody interesting coming out of that, and there's nothing funny about it or interesting. It's just, yeah, we're evil. That's how we get all these people to follow us. They like being evil.
We've basically gone from what North Korea is in real life to what North Korea was in The Interview.
I didn't see that.
Team America World Police, but so much worse.
But, like, less funny.
It's like General Hux, for example. In the last movie, he was your grade A Gestapo-style space Nazi. He was just hating on everybody. This one, he spends more time screaming and making faces and having these angry little slap fights with Kylo Ren. I don't know what's going on.
At first, it's kind of funny, and it's, like, meant to be funny. But after a while, we're like, all right, where's the villain? Like, who's the guy, like... Where's the new Darth Vader? Or where's the new Darth anybody? Because not only does the film remind us that Kylo Ren isn't Darth Vader in the most explicit way possible, like he just smashes his helmet at the beginning of the movie.
Is Snoke in your ugly section?
He's in here.
Because I think that's the bigger that's the indicative of the bigger problem with Snoke.
Hold on. He after he smashes his helmet, like the movie reminds us that. Not only is he not Darth Vader, but we're never going to even try to apparently get a villain anywhere as cool as Darth Vader.
Well, I mean, they're making
again.
it clear that Kylo Ren is still kind of a wounded little kid at heart. And I get that. They're showing that he's trying to grow up. He can't do it. And
Someone else needs to come up.
Yeah, so
that's why
he's still in charge of like this massive army of psychopathic murderers.
That's why after Prince Zuko stops fighting Aang, we get his sister coming up. We get someone so much worse. And then after his sister, it's the actual, Emperor himself. Wow.
The point being is, it's like at some point, I put myself in the shoes of one of the guys who's driving like the new AT-AT walkers because we have to sell more toys. At some point, he's got to think, man, my bosses suck.
Another sub point of bad guys sucked. Snoke.
Oh my
dies.
gosh,
Snoke dies even
like
more
a punk,
even more prematurely than Darth Maul. Like it would be like
Darth Maul at least made sense because it was clear from the beginning that he was just muscle. He was there to kill people. Snoke, they set him up in The Force Awakens as this shadowy supervillain who's got these plans. He knows what's going on. There's something about him. No one knows who he is. No one knows where he's coming from.
So I only say that because Darth Maul, he was interesting enough and like mysterious enough that people wanted to know more about him even after he died. That's why I say that.
At least he got the fight before he died.
He got the coolest fight. So Snoke dying here, it would be like as if somebody suddenly got a cheap shot on Darth Maul before that coolest lightsaber fight ever happened.
It would be like if Darth Maul ignited his lightsaber and then just Jar Jar Binks came running through with a shopping cart and knocked him into one of those pits. That's what happened in this movie. Like, Snoke went out like a punk. And that's the weird thing, is he's clearly the most powerful Force user we have ever seen.
Taunting, not Kylo Ren, Rey. Like, when they're in the throne room.
That part. He swings the lightsaber around and smacks her in the back of the head with it.
She pulls it out. Like, she's like, yes, I'm going to take this lightsaber from him. And then he just, like, allows it to, like, fly towards her. And then, whoops, misses, goes around her head, and smacks her. like, come on.
And there were all these crazy fan theories about who he might be. My favorite was thinking he might be Darth Pelagius, the guy that Emperor Palpatine was talking about in the prequels, who couldn't die. He figured out the secret to immortality. I was like, whoa, wouldn't that be crazy if it was him? But we never get to find out because he gets chopped in half and dumped out of the throne like he was like yesterday's lunch meat. It was ridiculous.
It was horrible.
Stupidest death. He's talking about how in tune with the Force he is. He doesn't notice Kylo Ren moving the lightsaber right next to him to kill him.
You had him set up as this big, mysterious, villainous character in The Force Awakens. You never actually see him. You just see him in these giant holographic projections in this dark room. And then you start to see him as that with like just his head comes up on the what was it when they're in that ship?
Yeah.
And he starts like what's the general's name again? Hux. He force chokes him, and he's not even in the room.
He just slaps him onto the ground.
Yeah, this guy gets like knocked all over the place, and it's Snoke doing it at the beginning of the movie, and that's what makes it cool. Is like Hux is the guy getting smacked around, so it's funny, but Snoke's still the big bad. And then after Snoke dies, we're like, what?
Honestly, the funniest part about it was right before he does die, he's just talking constantly about how he can read other people's minds, and he still doesn't see that coming. All that build-up, wasted. And that's pretty much the tone for the entire movie. Everything that was built up is now just wasted. Everything gets burned.
It was like they didn't even try. It was like the writers came up and were like, "Okay, guys, we wrote ourselves in a corner. Snoke's just too powerful. We gotta kill him off in a cheap shot."
All the critics are going, "Oh man, it's just so bold. It's so provocative. It's just so." He's just blazing a new trail. It's like, you know what, a chimpanzee with a hand grenade spinning around in a hospital ward, that blazes a new trail too. It doesn't mean it's good.
It sounds kind of funny.
Like on Snoke's death, that was one of the just stupidest, dumbest ways to kill off a villain who had been set up in such a great manner. And I feel like that's a good way to transition to the ugly stuff about this movie. Because there were a lot of ugly things.
All right, we'll start with you.
The ugliest thing was Luke Skywalker. And Mark Hamill himself.
Just in general.
Everything about Luke Skywalker.
I wanted them to somebody to tell him to close his jaw. His mouth spent too much time hanging open.
Well, I'm not so much his appearance, but it's just like everything he said, everything his character was. Mark Hamill in interviews said that when Rian Johnson gave him the script, he was like, no, this isn't what Luke would do. And we basically have a crazy old hobo who not only has somehow forgotten everything he learned in the original movies.
He, like, chooses to...
But forgot that he left them a map in the last one. Because she shows up on his doorstep and he's like, how did you find me? Go away.
Oh, yeah, how did they find him?
With the map that he left for them. He left a map with R2-D2 so they could come and find him again in case the galaxy needs his help. Rey shows up and the first words that Luke Skywalker says on film over 30 years is, go away. And that just sets the tone.
And he says, "What you think? You think I went to this super remote, like the hardest place to find, just so that someone could find me? Yeah, you left a map."
Like that was just.
If you forgot about that part in The Force Awakens, because I did, so that just made it even worse.
And so for people who don't care about Star Wars too much, it probably won't be that big of a deal. But for people who grew up on Star Wars, the completely eviscerating all the character development that happened with Luke Skywalker makes absolutely no sense. Like, Jedis running off and hiding as homeless people in the far edge of the galaxy, that's apparently a time-honored tradition. Ben Kenobi, Yoda, everyone did it. But the attitude they had stayed the same. Yeah. Luke gets there, and all of a sudden he just hates everyone, everything, loses faith in everything. Everything's suddenly about gray areas. The binary that made Star Wars great is dead. They've killed all the spirit that it had.
So some people were saying that something that made this movie work, I completely disagree, but they said that this movie allowed their male characters to be more emotional, and they use examples like Mark Hamill's Luke Skywalker, where he's just complains more and is just grumpy and thinks that the Jedi just needs to be destroyed.
But there's no depth of character. You just get this cranky old dude who is cranky about something in the middle past, which also is completely out of character. The backstory is that Kylo Ren, Luke sensed darkness in him.
And so in this fleeting moment, he thinks for a second,
maybe I should kill him.
I need to kill him.
This is the same guy that spent 3 movies trying to convince people that Darth Vader could be saved. The second most evil person in the history of the galaxy still had a shot at redemption. And here he is, standing over his nephew thinking, this kid's a little weird. I could just kill him right now. Where do you get that kind of logic from?
It's terrible.
That was the ugly. That was one of the ugliest things in this movie. Was just everything they did with Skywalker.
That was your number one.
And I'm glad that Hamill feels the way I do about it.
I'm not sure. I feel like some of the other actors feel similarly. There was a.
But the entire movie, he just looked like he didn't want to be there.
He was definitely like the worst. Well, he cares, I think, the most about the fan base.
He's a good actor,
too.
But the bitterness was a little bit more than acting.
I think Mark Hamill actually cares about the Star Wars universe and like the fan base.
He is
more
so
devoted.
Than everyone else. He has been to like every Comic-Con. He is such a huge nerd himself.
Like, he loves it. I'm sure he's been like waiting for a long time to reprise this role. And
this is what they do with him. And then they kill him also like a punk.
In post-production, they don't even tell him. Another reason why he's so mad. They don't even tell him they're going to kill off his character. And the thing is, he should have lived on. He had more reason to continue.
So there's this huge climactic scene where he has a showdown with Kylo Ren, and Kylo Ren tells all the AT-ATs just to light Luke up, because Luke comes out of the base all by himself with his lightsaber, and they blow the landscape to crap, and Luke is still standing there, and you're like, whoa, this is awesome. And so Kylo Ren goes down to fight him, and Luke is like, they exchange some witty banter. Kylo screams a lot, and Luke just kind of matrix his way out of everything. And then Kylo Ren chops him in half, but Luke is fine. And so he chops him in half again, and Luke said the last words that Luke Skywalker utters in the Star Wars universe to this date, before he dies, is,
"So long, kiddo."
See you around, kid! It's like, I'm surprised he wouldn't just have like a mustache to twirl, clicked his heels, and vanished. See you around, kid. That's how he goes out.
That's how he goes out. And then in that blaze of just being a troll across
you find out he was like astral projecting himself across thousands of light years, and he's still sitting on his rock back on his island. And you're thinking, whoa, I didn't see that coming. And then he just dies.
Because his life is fulfilled. He gave himself up to the Force because he's like, the Force just like, good job, Luke. You did it. You trolled Kylo Ren.
Have a cookie. You can be a Force ghost and hang out with Yoda.
Oh yeah, Puppet Yoda. We're back to the good, I think.
Puppet Yoda.
Puppet Yoda's
Puppet
back.
Yoda.
Puppet Yoda's a good. We'll
Puppet Yoda's good. Luke Skywalker ugly. So ugly.
All right. We're gonna go to my number one. For the ugly is this is okay. When episode 2 cuts the sound, it's cool. When episode 8 cuts the sound, bewilderment ensues. Remember in episode 2, those bombs that go off in the asteroid field?
Yeah.
Like the sound cuts for a second, then it's BWOW! And you're like, whoa, that's crazy. Those like what was it, Jango Fett bombs? And then episode 8, light speed battering ram, the sound goes out for like how long? Like 30 seconds?
I don't know, but I was like, dude, did they just blow the speakers in the theater?
Right. And everybody was thinking that because it's just, awkward.
And side note, if light speed kamikaze runs are so effective, why hasn't the rebellion been doing that this entire time? Their ships aren't worth anything. No one's gonna care.
Well, that's why, like, for real though, there were no sound strategies employed by anyone in this film. Like, military battle tactics in this just made no sense. Like, there wasn't any moment where you're like, huh, that was clever. Like, there's a lot of fighting happening in this movie.
It's like the
There's a lot
Star
of
Wars
action.
universe never stopped giving their kids lead-painted toys, and now several generations later, this is what we're left with.
Like, so like the bombing run scene, like I said, it looked cool, but
It was pretty stupid.
all the bombers, yeah, they like, half of them most of them, all but one, get destroyed by bumping into each other. Their initial strategy before this happens, before they run away from the resistance, is to have one guy, one ace pilot, swoop in and take out all of the guns.
If the guns can't shoot them because they're too small and too close, you could probably throw at least one other dude in there as a backup.
The only job of these onboard guns is to shoot these fighters out of space, and they can't hit this one guy across the entire, like, what do they call it? It's like a juggernaut ship?
Dreadnought.
A dreadnought ship.
And that
one guy, Poe Dameron.
The other thing about the first scene that was one of my uglies,
because he's a maverick.
One of the other things about that first scene that was one of my uglies was actually the humor in this movie. Like, I like Star Wars humor. Star Wars has always been funny, but the humor in this film is Marvel humor. Like, it's clearly
Your mom
Disney
joke
humor.
is not a Star Wars.
Like, they paused the combat,
Star
the
Wars
amazing combat, so Poe can give General Hux a your mom joke. And it's just like, it replays itself multiple times throughout the whole movie. Just like kind of like that awkward, like, oh, non-sequitur stuff you expect from Tony Stark, and it just doesn't click with Star Wars. It's like Disney is trying to turn Star Wars into Pirates of the Caribbean. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy Pirates of the Caribbean. I know they're stupid movies, but it doesn't work for Star Wars. That was my second ugly thing. Like, the humor was just weird.
The only humor I think that did work, or the humor that felt the most Star Wars, was the Porgs.
Yes.
Back to the good.
Because they were just kind of like these weird little things that were doing their own thing, and they're just kind of like screaming in the background.
And their interaction with Chewbacca. Like, it was just...
Star Wars has kind of been about screaming from the very beginning.
It kind of has. Like, I'm thinking of, like, one of the funnier scenes in Episode 4 is when, like, Han Solo's running down a hallway screaming, and then he turns around and runs down the hallway screaming because he's getting chased by stormtroopers. Like...
But that, like, sudden, just tone-breaking, awkward kind of humor. Just, it doesn't gel with the rest of the rest of the Star Wars motif.
The kind of humor where it has to slow down, it has to, like, stop for a second. That, I don't know. Yeah, just no sound strategies. I'm trying to think, like, it bothers me that you have this many different action sequences with this many different tools employed, and
everyone is somehow still just mind-bogglingly stupid.
None of it is in any sort of clever way. Like, we get it. It's sci-fi. All this tools, all this stuff is made up. But
Star Wars has always been over the top. But it's like, for Star Wars, this is stupid.
When you watch Star Trek, which is all a bunch of made-up tech, I'm thinking of, like, the last movie that I just saw.
Yeah.
The last one that came out. What was it called again?
I have no idea.
Whatever. It feels like
the new ones run together.
It feels like a classic sort of Star Trek episode. I was talking to you about this, where, like, they get stranded on a planet without a ship. They got to find a way off, and it's a fun movie.
It's not Star Trek unless they lose their ship.
But it's cool because the movie's also a sequences of problems that they go about solving in interesting ways.
In this movie, their problem solving consists of drive in a straight line.
Trust the Force, even though we don't know how it works. Because
drive in a straight line.
Because none of us were trained. But screw being trained in the Force. We need to kill the Masters. Kill the Jedi Order.
Can we talk about Leia real quick? And
you remembered my number 2 for the ugly. Carrie Fisher's sloppy send off.
Not even. That's the problem. Is it wasn't.
It could have been better. This I kind of wrote a quote as to like what my reaction was to seeing
now
her.
now that Carrie Fisher tragically did die, they're going to have to kill her off screen in the next movie.
They might have just edited this movie and allowed her to die in space.
It would have been worth doing some reshoots because you would have had a much stronger story. You would have had a reason for everyone to be freaking out on the ship, like because she didn't do anything for the rest of the movie. Like she literally passes control on to the next generation and just kind of like hangs around. She doesn't do anything else.
Yeah, it's true. When she does finally come back on the ship, like to kind of relieve Poe and be like, "Oh, General Leia is back," it just stuns her and be like, "Hey, you should have been listening to Purple Hair Girl all along." Like that was it. That's the last.
But
thing
it's
that
way
does.
She survived that was just beyond weird.
It was, the reaction was, "Oh, this is how they'll write her out." Dang!
Like that was pretty tragic. I was like, "Oh shoot! Did they just blow Leia out into space?"
We don't see people in Star Wars die by that way. We actually, there's very little reaction with the humans and the cold void of space in Star Wars.
And like you see it, it reminded me a lot of Yondu's death scene in Guardians of the Galaxy, where it's like, and I was ready to be heartbroken. I was heartbroken for Yondu. I was like, I will be heartbroken for Leia too, because you see her start to frost over. And I'm like, oh man, that is cold. Literally.
And then
everything changes.
Oh wait. Oh no. She's moving. What's gonna happen?
She wiggles her wrist and suddenly flies like Superman the whole way back to the ship and straight up knocks on the door, and then she's let in and no one reacts to this at all. That was the weirdest thing, is no one says anything. It's like, hey, Leia just flew back to the ship. Someone should open the door.
At least in Guardians of the Galaxy, they pull Star-Lord back in with a tractor beam. Like, somebody else comes and get him. Like, she flies back in.
It's like, yeah, I know Leia's attuned to the Force. I know Skywalkers are strong in the Force. She hasn't had a day of training in her life.
People are comparing her to Superman. Here's the thing. I think even Superman, technically, doesn't he need, like, something to push off of?
They've retconned that out, but originally, yeah. But the point is, like, no one ever even comments on it. So let's say it was like this instinctive thing triggered by a near-death experience. She just like, bam, reaches out instinctively. You feel like the people working for her would have said something like, boss, that thing you just did, what the crap was that?
Yeah, we never talked about it. Never talked about
the rest of the movie. No one says a word. And you guys remember the time that Leia flew back to the ship?
People's character reactions on this don't make a whole lot of sense at all. Like, do you remember any sort of reaction Luke having to the news of Han Solo's death?
There wasn't. They cut away from it.
That was it.
He goes, "Where's Han?" They cut back to Kylo Ren.
And that's it. Like, there's no, like, more, like, you'd think that would be something, a change would happen into him. Anything.
Or the death of Admiral Akbar. I didn't even know Admiral Akbar was in this movie until they told me he died.
I was so mad, because I did know he was in, I recognized him speaking once. I was like, yes, that's definitely Admiral Akbar. I knew that he was going to be in this movie. I can't wait. And then he gets sucked into space.
He was like this, but he was just like a random...
Super Leia did not save him.
What a douche. But he was like a random background bridge character, never even referenced at any point. They come back, it's like, oh yes, we lost many great people. Like Admiral Akbar. What? What? What other ugly stuff did you have? I'm saving my last one for last.
You're saving... Oh, so we already hit 2 of yours?
Yes.
But what was your number 2?
My number 2 is the lack of character development, but that's just across the board.
Okay.
It's not even worth going into.
Oh, well, for the last part of Carrie Fisher's sloppy send-off, I said the only thing we need to do to just kind of round this out, this atrocity, is bring her back in the sequel in a full CG like render, a la Tarkin style from Rogue One.
I don't know, man. That was pretty creepy. Like a real brief aside, Rogue One, they could have avoided all that Uncanny Valley stuff if they just had all the interactions with Tarkin happen via hologram. Nobody would have noticed because it would have been grainy.
It's true.
But instead, they had to have him there.
They had to have him there because it's one of those things in Hollywood where they're like, oh, you know what? The technology's there. We can make this look good. And Star Wars is known for pioneering special effects.
Like
we gotta make this work.
It's like when they brought Tupac back via hologram. There's just something wrong.
Michael Jackson back via hologram.
Michael Jackson was like pretty much a fake person by the time he died anyway, so it didn't really matter.
That's
true. He was more plastic than man.
It's just if you do that to anybody, it feels a little disrespectful. That's all.
But yeah, like I one of my ugly things is the lack of character development. Empire, which was what this movie is meant to be mimicking, was a huge moment of transition for so many characters. So much discovery, so much development happened. This movie, nothing. Rey continues to be naturally good at literally everything because the Force balances or something. Kylo Ren's a manic-depressive man-child with inexplicable bouts of screaming. General Hux is still a manic-depressive man-child with inexplicable bouts of screaming. Finn does nothing. Literally. Nothing. Everything he does in this film is ultimately pointless. You could have had him stay in a coma the entire movie. Nothing would have changed. The last chance he does get to do something is ruined by Rose.
We're kind of recovering.
Or Phasma?
What we're talking about. Oh, we didn't talk about Phasma.
Phasma,
you're right. Okay, remember all the marketing for Phasma and The Force Awakens?
She's literally on the screen for 2 minutes.
And how disappointing she was in The Force Awakens. They're like, oh, guys, we swear, we'll bring her back this time. It'll be good. We'll put her in a big old fight scene and stuff.
But ultimately, the worst thing about this entire film, hands down, bar none.
Oh, here we go.
Was the milking. Oh, God, the milking. So there's a scene on the island where Luke is like going...
My point 3 was Admiral Holdo's hair.
I would argue the milking was worse. The milking was... Purple hair I could deal with. They're like... I
don't know.
Padme's
hair me a lot.
Padme's hair was so weird that Admiral Holdo could have been straight up rainbow hair. It wouldn't have been stranger.
It still looks stately, though.
The problem... the milk. There's no way around this. So Luke Skywalker is like being followed around by Rey as he does his daily activity. This is some pretty cool stuff. Like when he spears that fish with the impractically long spear. It's like a pole vault.
Yeah.
And then he goes down to the rocks. There's like this naked giraffe thing just reclining with its crotch and gut jutting out. And
it looks like a giraffe beer gut monster with cow udders.
And he just like grabs one of those cow teats and squirts it into the bottle. And there's this like close zoom up on his face as he takes a big swig and looks back at the camera with it dribbling down his face going, oh yeah.
Then he busts through a wall. I'm the new Kool-Aid man of Star Wars.
The Cowling turns, just glanced lovingly at Rey like, hey, you want in on this?
Oh, that's true. She looked at Rey. No, for real. It did.
Everything about that scene, it's just like, I'm going to have nightmares about that to this day.
The takeaway, the big takeaway from The Last Jedi is it's just a series of like...
It's an inconsistent mess. It's inconsistent tonally. It has an inconsistent pace. It's inconsistent with the rest of the universe.
We'll go back to, remember, it was beautifully made. It looks really nice. It is entertaining. People say that one of the biggest cons is 2.5 hours. Like Peter Travers, Rolling Stone, his review.
It was a long movie.
He was like, one nitpick I have of this movie is it's just too long. He loved the movie, keep it in mind. He had nothing but great things to say about it until the length. He was like, it's 2.5 hours long. It's just too long. Honestly, it was entertaining enough that the length didn't actually bother me that much. There was enough flashy stuff happening on screen and cringy stuff that I kind of forgot about the length. The time went by pretty quickly. As nice as that was, that cringy stuff, those moments where you go, really? We're doing this now?
My reaction
Seriously?
my reaction to the entire movie was just the word seriously in different tones of voice. Like, seriously? Seriously. Seriously?
No, but for real though, you're gonna do that? Okay, but
really?
What?
And so ultimately that's where it comes down to, the huge divide between critics and viewers. Because critics are loving this movie for all the iconoclasm it does. Because it just tears everything down like, oh, it's bold, it's edgy. And they're accusing other people of getting too nitpicky. Like, I am totally fine with overlooking some plot holes and some contrived plot sequence. Like, you throw all the guffins you want in there.
You can find it in every movie.
As long as the movie itself is still compelling. And I think a good contrast to this is actually that new Netflix movie, Bright.
The movie's fun.
Because, like, right now...
So
The Last Jedi has like I said on not Rolling Stone, on Rotten Tomatoes, it's got a 91% fresh rating from the critics and a 53%. Sorry, no, it's a 51% now from the viewers. Viewers are not enjoying. They're not enjoying The Last Jedi. Bright, on the other hand, the critics have just been savaging it. It's got 29%. It's certifiably rotten. And meanwhile, 89% of the people who watched it have loved it. It's been so popular on Netflix. There have been so many views that they've already ordered a sequel.
It's one of those things where, like, I'm not going to agree with all these comparisons, but some people are like, dude, it's like Skyrim with guns. It's Shadowrun, but tomorrow. It's... you name it. Like, there's a lot of positive, things that a lot of people are saying about it.
It's Lethal Weapon, but with orcs. That's the upshot.
With orcs, it has elves. There's actually a dragon in it.
To back up a little bit,
there's a centaur.
To back up a little bit, the basic premise of Bright is if, like, the fantasy world that we read about that happened like thousands of years ago then progressed into the regular world. So you have orcs living with humans, elves are the rich upper class, orcs are the lower class.
It does feel like the Lord of the Rings, but like a couple thousand years in the future.
But it takes like a very gritty contemporary look at things.
Right,
it's a non-buddy cop drama, and it's actually pretty neat. The general premise is Will Smith is partnered with the very first orc police officer, and he is not happy about it. But the problem is things kind of hit the fan when a wand, which is apparently a magical device. They describe it in the movie.
They describe it as a nuclear weapon that grants wishes. It's like a huge deal. Everybody wants it.
And there's only 3 of them on the planet. And the reason that these wands are so special is you have to be a particular kind of person to wield it. If you're not what they call a bright or a wizard, and you touch a wand, then you explode. And the only way to find out if you're a bright or a wizard is to touch a wand and see if you explode.
I don't know if it's that, like, not everybody knows that or that people are just willing to take that chance. The point is everybody wants this device.
They're trying to keep the wand out of the hands of gangsters, terrorists, cultists, and
it's kind
your
of
own
that
rogue police coworker.
Rogue police, right? It's that kind of movie where it turns into everybody against just a few people.
And here's the critics' consensus that they have on Rotten Tomatoes for why the critics hated it. It says, Bright tries to blend fantasy, hard-hitting cop drama, and social commentary and ends up failing painfully short of the mark on all 3 fronts. The fact is, the only mark it falls short on is the social commentary. When you watch it from the beginning, it clearly acts like it wants to talk about police relations. But then it kind of loses itself in a generally fun movie.
It only does so to set up these races, which are clearly unique. They share similarity with, like, real world ethnicities, but which are present in the movie, but they each have their own differences. They each have their own quirks. Like, orcs aren't automatically the African American group. They have their own different style. Like,
their ethnic music is speed metal, which I just love.
Exactly. Yes, they're also, like, the stereotypical thing is that, like, black guys are good at basketball. Well, in this, orc guys are really good at football and can't play basketball at all.
Orcs literally, like, they cannot jump.
Yes. They actually make a comment about that when they're talking about this orc getting away. They're like, oh.
How many orcs do you know play basketball?
Exactly.
And people getting salty because a lot of people have been making the comparison between Bright and The Last Jedi. And they're like, oh, well, you can't compare the 2 movies. And it's true, you can't. They're 2 completely different genres, completely different movies. But the reason people are comparing them is because of the critic audience reaction.
It's something that came up that shortly after The Last Jedi came out and just disappointed everybody. And then Netflix came along with this movie that was easily accessible to everybody after they just dumped a bunch of money to go to the Star Wars premiere. And wow, this is really refreshing. Like, I'm glad I could watch this in the comfort of my own home. I wasn't expecting a whole lot out of this, and this is more than I was expecting. I mean, out of a Netflix
popcorn
movie.
in your pantry tastes better than the stuff you get in the movies anyway.
That's true.
But it's everyone I've talked to, and I'm not saying this is obviously not an exhaustive consensus, but everyone that I've talked to personally said they were pleasantly surprised by how fun of a movie it was. The premise is weird. There's a whole lot of contrivances, a whole lot of big plot holes in it too, but you just don't notice because you're along for the ride.
The story is fairly cliche. It's kind of an amalgamation of movies you've you've already seen.
It's not breaking any new ground.
What does make it interesting, though, and this is something I particularly appreciate, is they came up with a very unique setting that we just described. One where it's contemporary Los Angeles, but orcs and elves live there, and there's dragons flying overhead. You don't see very much of that. You see like one of them. There's a centaur. Like there's
random centaur.
Yeah, random centaur. Mounted police. They got fairies, which actually aren't really a sentient race. They're more like pests, which I thought was kind of
Will Smith just goes out and just beats one with a broom.
Yeah, they're literally just a pest.
It's like a squirrel. It's like squirrels. They're attacking your bird feeders.
Only more vicious, more like little flying goblins or something. Anyways, it's cool because they come up with this cool, unique setting, and they make it work. They give it a lot of function, and it feels believable. And then they set up the cliche story around it, and it's just you're just along for the ride.
The world building is very good. And
exactly.
I think that's what kind of bugs me about The Last Jedi so much is we know that Rian Johnson is good at world building too because Looper was such a good movie.
But we don't bother to see that world building in The Last Jedi. Maybe because he already just expects everybody to know.
He's just bent on tearing everything apart. So J.J. Abrams is coming back to direct the next movie. Anything he does, it isn't going to be building on what Johnson did. It's going to be fixing what Johnson broke.
We don't know. Do we know what's going to happen after this?
We don't, but the thing is he broke literally everything. So no matter what Abrams does, it's going to be fixing something. There's nowhere to go but up from here. Like this movie, The Last Jedi, is so bad it makes the prequels look good. Bright, on the other hand, like we said, it was definitely the underdog. It's some random movie that was put out by a streaming service. Darn it, it was fun to watch. I liked it.
I showed up for the last half of it for my initial viewing, and I was like, okay, I mean, I don't know how I feel about this. This is kind of weird. And I went back and watched it the whole way through, and that world building that happened in the first half, which was most of the first half, even just the introduction, like the intro credits where they're just showing graffiti and they're introducing the world through that. It was actually a lot more compelling than I was expecting it to be.
The chemistry
rest of the
was
movie
real.
was a lot more enjoyable. Yes, it was.
The chemistry
was fun to watch.
The characters were bouncing off of each other real well. Everything just clicked well.
It was the same. We're not saying that this movie is like a masterpiece by any set. It was the same director as Suicide Squad, and
this is so much better than Suicide Squad.
one of the better parts of Suicide Squad, I thought, was Will Smith acting like the Will Smith character that I remember from my childhood, essentially, like the guy from Men in Black, and he very much. I think has that kind of
hard-ass badass, if you will.
Yeah. Plus funny. Plus, like, he says everything, the hard-ass badass feel, but he says certain things that make you laugh at the same time. He's a really fun character.
But the upshot is the difference between the critical score and the audience score is telling. And that's basically the critic community has clearly lost some of its touch.
I don't want to write off the critic community either, because there's clearly a purpose for that job. There's clearly a purpose for somebody who's seen a lot of films, who understands the art form, to critique a film and from there, give their opinion as somebody who's more experienced, and then their recommendation to everyone else based on what they may or may not like.
Well, as far as I'm concerned,
they're not doing that job well.
As far as I'm concerned, their opinion sucks, and so you should listen to ours instead. And our opinion is leave The Last Jedi in the ground where it belongs, and instead check out Bright.
This is our opinion. We've seen way too many movies as well. I've taken several film courses, and at the end of it, all I want to do is watch some dumb, like Evil Dead or something. I don't know. I love Evil Dead.
Either way, bringing you the good movies for the average Joes and telling you what you can safely leave behind. I'm Louie.
I'm Dan.
And this has been Dead Man Walking.